Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Speak Plainly podcast, where we speak plainly about things that matter. I am your host, Owl Medicine, and today's topic of things that matter are boundaries. Boundaries matter. So today, that's what we're going to be talking about. What exactly are boundaries? It's kind of everywhere right now. It's something that most people are talking about, and we need to be talking about. The concept has made its way well into pop culture, especially into pop psychology. And there's a lot of definitions and ways to describe boundaries, but by far the best description that I've heard is boundaries are the distance at which you can love someone and love yourself at the same time. I love that. I love it so much. But why do we need boundaries? Essentially, a boundary is a psychological fence that allows us to say no. Saying no is a very necessary skill for all people in order to protect ourselves. We have limited amounts of energy, and we have to protect that energy at times, especially low energy times. So if you or anybody that you know has a really hard time saying no, it could be said that you or they have bad boundaries. Although that term is a little misleading because bad boundaries is most often actually a lack of boundaries. The way to be bad at boundaries is to just not have them or not enforce them for yourself. So how do you know if you have bad boundaries? Well, there's some signs that are pretty obvious that you can look for. The first one is you have a hard time making decisions. When you are presented with a decision that you need to make, you have a really hard time because you're weighing everybody's wants and needs and desires, and you want to accommodate everyone, but you can't find a way to accommodate everyone, so you freeze. Another sign is that you're a people-pleasing person. And this goes right along with the first one. Most people know whether they consider themselves to be a people pleaser or not. And women specifically are most often the ones who consider themselves to be people pleasers because our culture has trained them to be such. There's more on that, but we'll get to there later. It's not just that we're all trained to be people pleasers, but we'll get there. Women definitely have it worse, though. Another way that you might know if you are struggling with boundaries is that you take care of everybody, everyone around you. You love and you're there for, and you take care of all of them really, really well, but you don't take care of yourself. Another sign that you might be struggling, or somebody that you know struggles with boundaries, is oversharing. I love this phrase I got from MedCircle. There's a psychiatrist on there who calls it the smash and grab. And I love that. Because a lot of us we all have the desire to connect with another person when they're speaking. So when they tell a story, another story from our life comes up in our head, and we're like, hey, I have a similar story. Look, we're the same, and it's a way to bond. Some people way overshare. And it doesn't feel the same. We can feel when somebody's like, oh yeah, I've done that too, I'm like you, and then that's the point of the comment. And we can tell when somebody is doing the smash and grab, where you mention going to your uncle's for a hunting expedition. I don't know people who do that, but people do. And if you go to your uncle's for a hunting expedition, you tell your friends that, and your friend goes, oh yeah, my uncle molested me. That's the smash and grab. That's smashing a story in to grab the attention that they want, right? That's another way that you can tell you might be bad at boundaries. If you do the smash and grab, you probably have boundary issues. There's another way, taking on other people's problems. That's a really good way to know if you have boundary issues. And this one gets really complicated, especially for parents, because taking on other people's problems can look a lot like, I only exist as blank. Like, if I weren't a mother, I don't know what I am. If I weren't a father, if I weren't a coach, if I didn't have this job, I don't know what it would be. I don't know what I would be. That's a hard one for parents because you do take on other people's problems. Your children's problems are your problems. And it becomes very difficult for parents to put good boundaries between themselves and their children. And we'll get to that later. Passive aggressiveness is another way that you can tell that you have bad boundaries if you just stay passive until you get pushed to a point where you just slam down a boundary and you stonewall somebody and you're like, nope, I'm not going to engage. And you step away. That's childish. That's boundary issues. Don't do that. We all do it when we get pushed to that point, but we're here to try not to, right? Then the last one I have here is the fear of rejection and abandonment. If you have a fear of rejection and abandonment, it can be really hard to keep your own boundaries, especially in sexual realms, because somebody asks something of us and we want to feel wanted. So we want to give them whatever it is that they want because then they will want us. So it can get hairy. It can get hairy in the sexual realm. The lack of boundaries can. And something very interesting that you should know about struggling with boundaries is that every single type of personality disorder, there are basically 12 types of personality disorders: antisocial personality, avoidant personality, borderline personality, dependent personality, histrionic, narcissistic, obsessive compulsive, paranoid disorder. We have lots of personality disorders, and every single one of them, one of the main pieces that they struggle with are boundaries. So I find that very interesting from a philosophical perspective. I think it's interesting that what we call a personality disorder, all of them have this one piece in common with an issue with basically separating ourselves from other people and learning when to say no. So the first thing to understand about boundaries is that everybody is bad at them. So because I'm still writing Rethinking Broken and editing it and stuff, I'm still thinking about things in terms of CSA or chronic stress adapted. And so for the rest of the podcast, I'm going to be breaking things up into chronic stress adapted and non-chronic stress adapted people, which it's clearly not two different buckets. It's a scale. It's actually just a sliding scale where we put that line. That line between non-CSA and CSA doesn't really exist, but it is a gradient scale. And how much we struggle with boundaries definitely is influenced by how much chronic stress we experienced in our young lives. So for the rest of the podcast, I'll be separating those two for sake of clarity. Like I said, everyone is bad at boundaries. We're trained as children to do what our parents and teachers say. Considering at least they've proven themselves to be able to keep themselves alive, and a small child typically can't, maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing. But after childhood, where boundaries are ignored, we enter adulthood. And in adulthood, still, nobody sits us down and tells us what boundaries are, what they're for, or how and when to set them. And this makes us run into problems later on in life. Let's say, for an example, as a problem later on in life, let's say you have a friend who talks a lot. You're tired from a long day at work and after a long week of work. All you want to do is go home and be vegetative, but your perpetually cheerful and talkative friend wants to come over. They're on your side of town, and under normal conditions, you love their cheery disposition and really enjoy spending time with them. They text you and say, hey, I'm 5 minutes away. Can I swing by and chat? I miss you. Let's hang. What do? This is a situation where boundaries come in handy. So what do your boundaries look like in this situation? Well, the truth is that where the boundaries belong will probably be different and should probably be different for every single person in this position each time that this situation happens. So let's look at a couple of options. Working from our definition of good boundaries, or just boundaries, because the only way to have bad boundaries is to not have boundaries. But working from that definition of boundaries keep other people at a distance in which we can love them and ourselves at the same time, we're going to need to say no eventually to protect ourselves, even from our favorite people. So if person A, who is tired after a long week, is sure that if talkative friend B were to come over, then friend A wouldn't be able to muster up the energy and enjoy the company, which means things might go south. Maybe friend A will take a joke wrong. Maybe friend A will get low-key mad at friend B for texting when they're only 5 minutes away and making them feel pressured into socialization. That's the getting mad at somebody else's boundaries issue. Maybe friend A feels pressured into socializing, but then decides that socialization is what they're always being told that they need. So they say yes, come on over, knowing that it's probably going to exhaust them more. But in their heads, they believe that it's the right thing to do. So they give up that boundary and say, yeah, come on over. A good boundary embraces discomfort over resentment. So in this situation, a good boundary might sound like, assuming that this person is tired and doesn't want them to come over, friend A. It might sound like, hey, thanks for thinking of me. I've had a long week and a very long day today. I need time to recoup before I can people again. I hope you have a great night, and I look forward to the next time we get to hang out. There's a few things in addition to the boundary in this statement that are included because they're useful tools to make boundary setting easier for those that are just learning, especially for those of us who tend to have a hard time setting boundaries because we feel bad, which is most of us. But we'll get to that a little bit later. The boundary in this statement was saying, I'm exhausted and need to recoup before I people again. That's what I call a soft no. Okay, so now we're getting into soft no's and hard no's. These are ways that we can boundary. We can soft no or we can hard no. At least that's what I call it. A soft no in boundary setting is saying no without actually saying the word no. There are certain, usually upper socioeconomic status kind of stratifications that their whole communication is kind of predicated on this. It's like the whole plausible deniability thing. They don't actually say no. They just keep beating around the bush. It's all these soft no's. It's kinder sounding, and for many people, it's easier to receive a soft no because the soft no isn't definitive, and just hearing no can be hard. So instead of outright saying no, a soft no shares a reason that implies the no. In this case, I'm exhausted and need to recoup before I can people again implies the no without actually expressly stating it. A hard no, on the other hand, is a statement that includes the word no in clear reference to the question or subject at hand. In this case, the hard no could look very similar to the soft no, but must include the word no. One option might be, unfortunately, no, not today. I'm exhausted and need to recoup before I can people. Hard no's are useful because they make it absolutely clear that the answer is no, leaving no confusion where your boundary is. And we all have people, friends in our lives who do not pick up subtext. They don't, and we have to be able to say no outright to them, or they don't hear no. They just hear another reason, and then their problem solving as to why that reason can be thrown to the wind, and we can hang out anyway. So hard no's are useful because they make it very clear that no is the answer. Another perfectly acceptable boundary statement in this situation might be, hey, I'm sorry, but that's a no today. That's a little harder but equally valid. Another valid hard no statement might just be the word no. No is a complete sentence. And that is all that you need to express for it to be a complete thought. But that can cause problems. We all need help with boundaries. Chronic stress adapted people and non-chronic stress adapted. In my future ideal world, where we're all rethinking what it means to be broken and carving out our own beautiful, unique paths for ourselves, we're all going to be on the giving and receiving end of boundaries and these boundary statements, as I'm calling them. So let's look at boundaries from the receiving end to be prepared for the hopeful inevitable. Imagine hearing, "I'm sorry, but that's a no today," from a close friend. Now imagine just hearing the word no in response to a "let's hang out" text request. If somebody says, "Sorry, but that's a no today," yeah, okay, cool. That's a no. Just the word no can feel very harsh. It hurts a little bit, right? "I'm sorry, but it's no today" is a little disappointing, whereas just no, 2 letters, kind of hurts. There's no reason given, there's no explanation, and this is the trouble with hard no's. No is a complete thought. It is a full sentence. That's all you need to say. But the harder the no, the greater the chance that you have of injuring the relationship. That's why we have soft no's. Sometimes soft no's are too soft, and a hard no seems overkill. So we create a combination of the two, where we say no and we do an explanation. And that's like the Tai Chi version, right? It's both soft and hard. That's like the beautiful Tai Chi of it. You get the explanation, you get the hard no. So you get practice at saying no, which is hard, but you also get practice at giving an explanation and a reason, which makes it easier for you. Sometimes soft no's are too soft and hard no's seem overkill, so we create a combination of the two with an explanation, including the word no. And if we really care about the feelings of the other person that we're talking to, we give them our boundary in what we call a shit sandwich. What if I hate saying no because it makes me feel bad? Well, join the club, baby. Pretty much everybody feels bad when setting boundaries. It's kind of inevitable because boundaries separate things. And all we want to do is be connected and give and receive love and enjoy stuff. And boundaries separate things. That can be uncomfortable. They separate requests, wants, and needs of another person from your own. And it prioritizes one over the other. It's inevitably an uncomfortable situation to have your needs stratified this way, especially when you're just learning how to set boundaries. So to make it easier, you can use shit sandwiches. The original boundary statement here that was used, I call a high-quality boundary statement because it's that Tai Chi boundary statement inside a shit sandwich. To me, that's the best. If you can get the Tai Chi inside of the shit sandwich, you're golden. It was, "Hey, thanks for thinking of me. I've had a long week ending in a very long day. I need some time to recoup before I people again. I hope you have a great night. I look forward to the next time we get to hang out." Most of that statement, about 2/3 of the statement, isn't a boundary at all, is it? Firstly, it's employing the soft no strategy, but there's clearly more than that too. There's no actual no in the statement. None of the rest of the statement was even necessary to say, as a part of the boundary anyway. But it can be very helpful for those of us who feel bad during boundary setting to do what we did here, which was the shit sandwich. All right, now I'll break down the shit sandwich for you. Every branch of the military is really big on this one, and the Air Force is included. It's been a super useful skill for me, and in the military, you get lots of practice receiving and eventually giving criticism. When you get high enough in rank that it becomes your job to give criticism or correction, we're told and trained to do so with what's called the shit sandwich. Think of it like this. Whatever the thing that needs to be corrected is, in the case of boundary setting, saying no is the correction. The correction or no, whether it's soft or hard, is essentially the turd. The turd is the meat of the sandwich. It's the substance. It's the important bit. That's the actual boundary. But turds taste awful, or at least I assume so. They're always assumed so. I'm not going to try it to find out. But the bread on either side, if you have to eat a turd, you put the bread on either side, like keep it off your tongue, right? And the bread should be something positive. It helps the turd just go down easier. So the formula is just that if you have to say something that's hard, something that's hard to hear, start with a compliment. Then you say the hard thing, that's the turd in the middle, and then you finish with another compliment. The compliments are the bread and the hard thing is the turd. There you have your shit sandwich. In the military, they teach everyone who makes sergeant this tactic. It's meant to simultaneously make it easier to hear criticism without getting down on oneself. It's also been proven that people respond much more positively and are more likely to do the correction that they need to do if the correction is delivered with this system. But I find that as a CSA person myself, it makes it easier for me to say no because I'm actively taking steps to avoid hurting the feelings of the person with which I need the boundary, while also getting the space that I need. Most CSA, chronic stress adapted folks are like me in this matter. Saying no can be and often is much, much harder than hearing no. The shit sandwich makes it easier to hear no, but more importantly, at least for our purposes, like for me as a CSA person and for the purposes of my book, it also makes it easier to say no. Like, it was intended for it to be easier to hear no, and then you'll actually do whatever you're supposed to do, but I find it makes it way easier to say no, and that's really, really helpful. Because I like to view myself as a bit of a rebel. I've always been getting myself into trouble by finding out what the rules are just so I can bend or break them, but somehow it's still my natural instinct to say yes to nearly everything that's asked of me. And also I hate that. Like I do. I get that it makes me a nice person or whatever, but it's just really damned inconvenient most of the time. So it is what it is though. Especially when it comes to socialization and connection, and especially as a person with anxious attachment tendencies. No matter how much of a rebel I feel, it's still difficult for me to say no to situations like this one. That becomes even more true if that person is already close by or we're close friends. And things get way more sticky for me, like all on a whole nother level, if our relationship is physical, sexual, or romantic. It would be very easy for me and very natural for me in this situation to be like, yeah, totally, it's fine, come on over. But if I do that, I betray myself and my own needs. Self-betrayal is the price of bad boundaries, which in turn reinforces that our own needs are not important, leading to a whole stack of issues, not the least of which is if we don't respect our own boundaries, why the hell would anybody else? We have to respect our boundaries because bad boundaries lead to exhaustion and burnout. No boundaries, which are bad boundaries, means that we don't know how to say no, which means that we're doing something for someone else basically all the time. And that is its own reward in a way, which makes boundary setting that much harder. It's a complicated and difficult task because what it is we're balancing our needs with the needs of those that we're closest with, the needs of our community. Most of us enjoy doing stuff for other people. We enjoy being of service, at least in some way. We want and need to do stuff for other people and vice versa. We, at least in theory, want them to help us too when we need it, even if we don't want to ask, i.e. the in theory part. But that's what community is. If we can't say no to the people in our community, we will resent them for how much they've asked of us. That's the getting mad at somebody else's boundaries. It's like, well, they should know that they're asking too much of us. Really, Susan? Because you never say no. For folks without boundaries, it eventually begins to feel like the entire world is demanding something from us. So we begin to resent the entire world and become reclusive. Boundaries help us to choose discomfort now over resentment later. I said I'll be talking about things CSA versus non-CSA to some degree. Here's why everybody is bad at boundaries. Everybody has to learn them eventually, but in our culture, it just isn't taught. Nobody sits us down and teaches us these things, which is why everyone across the board struggles with boundaries. Struggling with boundary setting makes obvious sense for two primary reasons for everyone, not even just CSA. So we'll cover the first two that cover everybody. Reason number one is an evolutionary perspective. This harkens back to my bone to pick with Maslow. A major functional aspect of our basic human nature as a social species is to be liked. Whether you like it or not, it is important to your survival to be liked. Because if we're liked, we're more likely to belong. Humans as a species have always done things in groups. Hunting, sleeping, shelter building, foraging. Because of this, belonging to a group of other humans is your village, your clan, your friend group, your clique, provides us with food, safety, and shelter. Being liked is a big part of the reason boundary setting is hard for everybody. Because in a way, having good boundaries, being able to say no to your community goes against this biological desire to be liked, because it goes against this need to belong, which is what provides us safety. In many parts of America, the response to why from a small child, or even a teenager, will often be met with something like, because I'm your mother and I said so, because I'm your father and I said so, because I said so, or just because it's my house and I pay the bills. Though this sentiment might be more intense or more repeated more often in chronic stress homes, the statement is ubiquitous in response to the ever-present why of tiny Americans with tired, exhausted parents across the country. The issue is that the heart of this response informs the child. When someone in authority says, do this, you just do it. No questions asked, regardless of the reasoning, whether it's good for you or bad for you, whether it crosses your boundaries or not, you just do it. This is part of the reason that as a culture, we make great obedient workers for the hierarchies that employ us. Even those who grew up in less chronic stress adapted homes push themselves beyond their physical limitations for their employers. Many wind up sacrificing their minds, their mental health, their bodies, and their happiness for their jobs, which is how we've created the most anxious, depressed, addicted, and medicated culture the world has ever known. That's why it's hard for everybody to have good boundaries. For CSA folks, it is even harder. Saying no as a child is all but forbidden, if not expressly forbidden, in many chronic stress-filled American households. And I say the household for a reason. If you became chronic stress adapted during your childhood, it is really important for you to understand that your parents were probably chronic stress adapted as well. You probably already know that your parents weren't Zen masters who lived their own internal lives in perfect peace while stressing you out just for the hell of it. If your parents were stressed out of their minds your entire childhood, guess what behavior you're going to model? And if they were stressed out, they probably were stressed out because they too had bad boundaries. And since we all learned from modeling, what do you think your default programming is going to be? Not only were you not taught what boundaries were, many of us were shown by modeling, through modeling from our parents, that they're really not that important. Most adults suck at setting boundaries, mostly because they were never taught. Even non-chronic stress adapted people, like we established. What makes a non-CSA person is that they got to learn in some way a very basic form of self-worth at a young enough age that saying no happens a little more naturally and automatically. It's your self-worth that is the tiny voice inside that tells you that you deserve better, that you deserve to have your needs met. That sense of deservedness that is instilled in non-CSA folks is a small layer, but an important layer of protection that does make it slightly easier for them to have boundaries. They will still need lots of practice to get good at boundaries because of the previous two reasons we talked about why everybody struggles with boundaries. But it can definitely be done. CSA and non-CSA alike. But for us CSA people, we have to learn how to do this consciously from the ground up later on in life because we don't have that piece of self-worth often that allows us to go, no, I deserve better. I don't want to run myself into the ground. I'm not going to overextend myself for this person or this job or this event. The reason it's hardest for CSA people is because in order to learn anything at all as a human, we must first experience a sense of safety. And to get good at something, said human must also practice said thing. So boundaries are hard for us because we didn't experience enough psychological safety to fully develop the brain structures that we were designed to have. So it makes sense that we would have almost no chance of saying no, let alone practicing saying no. So we definitely didn't get the chance to learn the self-evaluation skills necessary to make good boundary decisions for us in any given moment as adults. Being able to say no is what a boundary is all about. We need to be able to say no so we don't overextend ourselves and get ourselves hurt or sick, physically or mentally. And our boundaries change. Over time, they move, and we need to be able to adjust them when it's appropriate. We need to be able to move our fences to make room for the people that we want in our life, and to be able to move those fences back closer to ourselves when we want them closer to us. It's a hard tightrope to walk, balancing the needs of the many with the needs of the self. But it's paramount. It is fundamental to our survival and health that we do it. So, for boundaries, remember that boundaries are the distance at which I can love myself and somebody else at the same time. That's where they go. So, I know it's hard to do, but I promise your life will be much, much, much better when you start choosing discomfort now over resentment later. Choose your boundaries. All right. Thank you very much for listening. This is my 2 cents on boundaries today. In 2 weeks at the next podcast, we're going to be talking about non-negotiables, which is a form of a boundary, but a bit more intense. If boundaries are fences that we can move, but with some difficulty, non-negotiables are stone walls. Join me in the next podcast to learn all about non-negotiables and where they belong and why they're absolutely necessary for chronic stress adapted people. Thank you all for joining me. I hope that you enjoyed this podcast. If you did enjoy it, consider donating on Patreon. Consider clicking the buy me a coffee, because then you don't have to do anything every month, and you can just be like, hey, here's a coffee, bruh. And I would love that because I drink a lot of coffee. So if you feel like supporting, support. If you don't. I hope that you will join me in the next episode either way. And remember, stay curious and stay uncomfortable.